History Scholars. This is Thursday, March 19th. Before we start on our lesson, I want to give you a couple quick quizzes. I want to give you 3 events in history, not necessarily ones we've covered, and I want to see if you can put them in order. See which one came first, second, and third. Just based on what we have talked about, based on your knowledge. You can even pull your parents in and see if you can win against them. I just want to give you just a few, and we may do this every few days. First, okay, so here's your first 3. Burning of Washington, and we're not talking about a person, we're talking about the city, right? Burning of Washington. Thomas Jefferson becomes president. And the third one is the Declaration of Independence. This should be a pretty easy one. Okay, got the order? It should have been first, Declaration of Independence, then Thomas Jefferson becomes president, then the burning of Washington, right? Because remember who was president during the burning of Washington? Madison, right? Because Dolly Madison ran out and took the stuff with her. She was left kind of by herself. All right, good job. Let's do another 3. Let's try this one. Okay, Abraham Lincoln becomes president, the Louisiana Purchase, and the first appearance of the Coca-Cola brand. Now this one is one we haven't really talked about, so see if you think you can place that. Okay, Lincoln, Louisiana Purchase, Coca-Cola. Got it? Okay, first, Louisiana Purchase, 1803, Louisiana Purchase. Then Abraham Lincoln becomes president in 1860, and then Coca-Cola brand, 1886, probably sooner than you thought, huh? 1886, so that's around the time period we are right now talking about. Okay, last 3, here we go. California enters the United States as its 31st state. Samuel Colt introduces the revolver. We did talk about that. And the Transcontinental Railroad is completed. Okay, you got an idea in your head? The first one was the revolver, 1835. The second one, California, 1850. Was that before the Civil War? Yes. And then the last one is the railroad, 1869, after the Civil War. All right, good job. Good testing of your history knowledge. Now, today we are going to continue with Hayes. We talked about his personal, kind of who he was and about Lemonade Lucy yesterday, and today we're going to continue with events. All right. Again, I know that there's quite a bit here. You're going to write quite a bit, but you can pause it, take a while, get up, take a little break, and then come back, stretch your hand out, whatever. You know how it works, so you can do it the way that it works best for you. So we talked about a little bit yesterday that when he was elected, remember his nickname was his fraudulency. Why? Because he didn't have popular votes and he was elected by Congress. And there were accusations of fraud, mainly because he promised that he would remove federal troops. So these 2 things that I have on the screen first go together. He was elected by Congress because of problems, accused of fraud. Why? Because he agreed to remove all federal troops from the South. Okay, so if we see the removing of all federal troops from the South as a cause, okay, that's the end of Reconstruction as we know it. The end of Reconstruction. So if that's the cause, what do you think would be the effect? It's been about 10 years since the Civil War has been over. The South has been plagued, I guess you could say, by Northerners coming down and kind of trying to take over in some ways, take advantage. They have tried to take advantage of the free black men that were there, not allow them to vote and different things. So now you have a president who we still have a Republican in office. So this would have been the party of the Union. He comes in and he says, I'm removing all troops from the South. So the South is relieved. They don't have troops walking down their street anymore. But what do you think that would cause? Think about that for just a minute. They don't have any troops. They leave. What would be the effect? So let's look at some of the effects. Blacks, African Americans are denied voting more. Remember, that was one of the problems right after the Civil War. They were trying to make all these what they called black codes, trying to keep them from having rights. Oh, you have to know how to read to vote. Oh, you have to know how to do this. Well, had they ever been taught? No, absolutely not. So it wasn't fair. And so the cause, troops are removed. What do? They go back to their old ways. They're denied voting more. White leaders have free reign. The KKK, remember we talked about the Ku Klux Klan, becomes more strong and more violent. Why do you not just have the police step in and take care of that? Why? Because many of them were in that group also. So you have that becoming more and more and more of a problem. So you see that there is a problem with the removal of troops. So cause and effect. History is full of it. Full of cause and effect. Okay, so here's another one. The railroad strike. This was a big event during his term. We didn't talk really about it, but during Grant's term, there was a panic of 1873, which anytime, remember, we've talked about panics before. When you have a panic it's because there is some sort of a depression. Our economy is always doing this. There wasn't just one depression called the Great Depression. There are little depressions all the time. We're going up, our economy is doing great, and then it tanks a little bit, and then it goes up, and then it tanks a little bit. It's always doing this. It's not a steady line. So we had a panic in 1873 during Grant's term, and because of that, there were some pay cuts to the workers of the railroad. Well, it got too much. It got too heavy, and so a lot of the workers decided that they would strike. Well, what does strike mean? Strike means I say that I'm not going to work, and I basically show up for work, but I stand there and say I'm not going to do anything. So there's a few options with strike. They can bring in the police, and the police can kind of break things up. Sometimes that causes more and more violence, and the federal government actually has to get involved. And that's what happened here. It just caused the violence just escalated and got more and more and more and more and more. And federal troops were finally sent in to bring order after hundreds of deaths and thousands of injuries. So this railroad strike was a pretty big deal. And it just shows kind of the panic that hits people when they don't have what they think they need to survive. And we see that happening lots of times, not just at this one time in history that we're talking about. When you're talking about history, you're talking about events that repeat themselves. Why? Because people are the same. And they're going to react the same to events, whether they live in 1870 or they live in 2020. Many, many times they react the same way. Okay, another thing going on at this time, I'm going to go ahead and go all the way past there. So again, if you need to, go back, pause me. Congress, okay, let's back up for just a minute. So we have built a railroad all the way across the country. How have we done that? Who has done it? Lots of different people have done it. But we have had a lot of Chinese immigrants come over to help build the railroad. We even had like signs up in China saying, hey, you want to come to the United States and help us build the railroad? Yeah, okay. So they would leave and come and get a job. And so where do most of these people live now? They live in California. And 1 out of every 10 people at this time that we're talking about was Chinese in California. And you also had immigrants from all over different countries too. And another big set of immigrants was the Irish. Well, the Irish immigrants needed jobs too, but the Chinese would work for cheaper. They would work harder and they would work for less wages. And so the Irish started attacking many times just in the streets these Chinese immigrants. And it got really, really bad because there was a lot of competition over jobs, especially once the railroad was built. Once the railroad was built and the Chinese were competing over other jobs in California, that was even worse because there weren't as many jobs available. So Congress wanted to just ban Chinese immigration, just say they can't come because there's problems for whatever reason. The Irish were here longer, maybe they were protecting them more, and just say, let's just end this problem by saying they can't come over anymore. Well, Hayes vetoed that bill because he thought it was prejudiced. He thought it was wrong, and he vetoed the bill. But he worked out a treaty, the Treaty of 1880, that limited immigration, but it was in a way that was acceptable to the Chinese government. So if we just do something and we say, well, I don't care what you think and I don't care how you feel about this to the government, then we could have problems that, there's that word again, escalate and become worse later. So Hayes actually talked to the Chinese government and worked out this treaty with them so that there would be a reduction of immigrants, and mostly to protect them from the violence that was happening towards them. So I think that's pretty cool. I like how Hayes intervened in that and what he did to kind of help that situation. Now, remember I talked about not just Grant, but it goes all the way back to Andrew Jackson, where when a new president comes in, he kind of fills all the offices with people that agree with him, that like him. John Quincy Adams didn't do this, and that was his downfall. He kept people that did not agree with him, and they kind of worked behind his back. Then when Jackson comes in, Jackson just fires them all out and hires people that agree with him. And you have a lot of people doing that as they come in. Grant did that. So you have Hayes trying to get rid of some of this corruption that has come up in the government because they have been put in positions of power. And you have a lot of, at this time, what's called political bosses. People who rise to a certain power and have so much power and so much political influence that they can get someone to do what they want just because of their influence. I want you to hire my nephew for this job, or I'm going to blah, 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 blah. And this became a really big problem. And Hayes tried to start some reform in those jobs during his time. And one of the things he did was he fired several federal officials who were using their offices for political gain, who were not using their offices well. And one of these jobs that was a high kind of position that had a lot of political gain, but maybe not a lot of work to it, was the collector of the duties of the Port of New York. So they would collect the money that was required for what was coming in. And can you imagine if you're a money collector? These were people not even liked in the Bible, right? Because what did the money collectors do? So the government says you owe $10, but you really owe $12. And what would they do with the extra $2? Put it in their own pockets, right? Well, this position was one of those that you could do that very easily with. And the person in that position was Chester A. Arthur. And Hayes fired him. This is only interesting because he becomes president in a couple of terms. So we're talking about the 19th president right now. Chester A. Arthur becomes the 21st president, and that's why it's interesting that he's fired from this job. Now we have a few things that's kind of takes care of the political things and what's going on in the government. Here's the things going on in society. When you think about other things and you say, oh, that's when it happened. Oh, that's who was president when that happened. That's what I want you to do. Okay, here's a few things. One, Jesse James. Ever heard of Jesse James? He was a famous outlaw robbing trains um, out west. He was a former Confederate soldier, and he became a famous outlaw in the West, robbed trains and banks. Um, and that's just a name that you're going to hear. Jesse James and his gang. And that was going on around this time. You also have, dun dun dun, Thomas Edison. Thomas Edison invented the light bulb in 18. I'm going to move further down here. Invented the light bulb in 1879, and I want you to know the name of where his laboratory was, because that's a name that you're going to hear at some point in your life too, and I want you to be able to connect them. So Menlo Park, New Jersey, and he had this big laboratory. He had lots of people that worked with him. He wasn't the only one. I also want you to know that what he had been working on for so long was finding a filament that would burn, that would be cheap enough that he could kind of mass produce it, and electricity would be available for more people, and that would burn for a long time. And this is where we show Thomas Edison really having this work ethic, really having a growth mindset, because he kept trying things and they wouldn't work and they wouldn't work and they wouldn't work, and he kept working and he tried hundreds and hundreds of different things, and he finally found the right filament, which was scorched cotton thread. After trying all of the different things that he found, that's what he found. And so he demonstrated his use of his light bulb at his laboratory in 1879. And then around 1881, we have Barnum and Bailey's circus becoming popular. Before this, Phineas T. Barnum had started his circus, but he partners with Bailey in about the beginning of the 1880s, and then they start going to small towns using tents that they could set up and take down pretty quickly. Had characters such as Tom Thumb, who was a 25-inch tall midget, and you have the elephant Jumbo, and it became known as the greatest show on earth. So that's what's going on in this time. If you have anything else that you know about, that you have found about, put those down in the comments for us to look at later. All right, in the comment section, I want you to do what we did at the beginning with the cards. I want you to look through your notebook, and I want you to find 3 different events. Put them in the comment section, out of order, and as people look at them, we're going to see if we can put them in order. So this gives you a chance to participate in our little game. Okay, so pick 3 events, and I'm going to try to look at these later, and I may use them in a future video. So pick 3 events that we have talked about. It could be from any time. Just pick 3 different random events and put them in a random order, and we'll try to figure them out. Okay, I hope you're keeping up with your notes. I hope you're challenging your curiosity. I hope you're looking up things that you're interested in. Keep using those books that I sent home with you to find out your own information, and share those facts with me. If I'm missing something that you think I should include, let me know. Have a great day.